Thanks for tuning in to this year's cotton tour. If you were able to be here in person, I'd be walking you through some variety trials. We'd be looking at some of our management trials and talking a little bit about defoliation. Since I don't have you here, I think I'm going to try to cover most all of that very briefly in a short video. Our variety testing program looks very similar to what it has looked like in the past. We've got 44 entries this year. Our fruit retention looks very good. I'd say overall our plant height's a little bit shorter. We probably have one or two fewer nodes, but our yield potential looks very good. And I've got some concerns moving forward with the forecast, and I'll touch on that here in a minute. But I think we're going to be able to deliver some really good data for you, hopefully in a timely manner this fall, if the weather will cooperate. If you have interest in walking these trials, we do have a few locations that are very easy to access, and I'd be more than willing to share plot plans and help you get to the field and understand the layout. So feel free to reach out to me. If you don't have my cell phone or my email, look online. It'll be easy to access there. So that's a quick variety testing update, and we'll have a little bit more information on our large plot variety testing a little bit later on another video with Jake Mallard, Madison County Extension Agent. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I think is pretty interesting, and I think it'll be very important as we move forward into the next year. 2019, as many of you recall, was a pretty tough year for seed. And so we've had an opportunity to join two projects. One, a seed quality project supported by Cotton Incorporated, and two, a seed size project that stems from some work at Mississippi State. And I want to start with the seed quality. This is a really interesting project that's managed by Murillo Maeda out of Texas A&M, a cotton specialist, and we have locations scattered throughout the belt on this trial. We're basically pulling random lots, and we're planting them all together, and we're watching them grow and mature, and we're going to take them to yield. And the main focus of the project is to determine if the quality of the seed that you get right there at the beginning of the year could potentially impact in-season growth and ultimately yield potential. So we have several very common commercially grown cultivars. We've got numerous lots within each of those cultivars, and we'll have some overhead shots of the plots. It's a really interesting study, and I'm really excited that Murillo Maeda is leading that effort. I think it'll really provide some insight and maybe help us understand the value of that seed to where when you purchase it, if it is a little bit lower quality, hopefully they'll offer it to you at some type of a reduction, a discount. The seed size project, it kind of goes after the same objective, right, to determine the quality of that seed and how that could potentially impact in-season and late-season growth and ultimately yield potential. This project's much larger, and we have several lots within each variety included. We're seeing differences within cultivar when you change seed size, and we all know, depending on how that seed table is set up and the quality of the growing conditions where that seed is grown, we can see differences in seed size within cultivar. We see a lot of differences in seed size across different cultivars, and so completion of this project is going to be really valuable, and again, I hope provide some value to you as you select seed lots and then have to pay for those seed lots when you're establishing your cotton crop. The last thing I want to mention, and just to kind of include some timely information here, our forecast right now with Laura doesn't look great. We're still sitting somewhere between 2 to 4 inches of rain. The most recent pattern has a hard right hook, and hopefully it moves out of our area fairly quickly. But I've got some concerns. We've had a fairly substantial prolonged dry period in West Tennessee. A lot of our cotton crop is completely shut down. Again, we ended with probably a little less plant height and one or two fewer nodes than we would typically expect. But because still has tremendous yield potential, but because the plant's so shut down, a big flush of rain like this could really, number one, allow for regrowth to occur, basal regrowth low on the plant, which is really going to complicate defoliation. I think number two, could drive target spot, and I'm not too concerned about that. I'll pull a plant here in a minute. We can talk about that. And number three, generate some boll rot. Of those three, I think boll rot would be my biggest concern. There's really nothing we can do right now to manage boll rot. The only thing we can hope for is a quick rain event Hopefully not one that brings wind, but a quick rain event that moves through the area and allows sunshine and maybe a little bit of a breeze to follow. We need that canopy dried out fairly quickly. And again, based on my comments, I think we've got a shorter canopy, a more open canopy, so hopefully we'll be able to get through without having a dense, humid canopy for a long period of time. Bollrite, though, we don't have any management options on bollrite that are efficient. One thing that we talk a lot about target spot and fungicide use. If we do see target spot move in now, that could actually be a little bit of a benefit to us. And what I want to talk about, target spot is typically going to come in low in the canopy and impact our main stem leaves. If that happens, if it starts removing these leaves that are low on the plant, these leaves aren't providing much value to us anymore. They're most likely 50 to 55 days old, if not older, and at that point, they're not providing really any value to the plant. So something like target spot that might impact these leaves, it would only open up the canopy a little bit more, and that could be a real benefit to us. You may see target spot move in. If target spot stays low in the canopy, in my opinion, in this year, it's not something that I'm going to be terribly concerned about. We're late enough in the year, and we've got large bolls low on the plant that are not going to be demanding much more photosynthate. We should be safe from target spot. The one thing that we can manage and is going to be a big concern for us if we do happen to get excessive rainfall over the next several days is going to be regrowth low on the plant. And you can already see this area behind me it's fairly shallow soils. It's been pretty dry, and you can see in these axillary buds they've already released, and we're starting to get some small leaf material growing. A lot of times when we talk about regrowth, I think generally we think after defoliation, but as you can see here, we're already starting to get back growth or vegetative growth in between in these axillary buds. This is going to be very, very difficult to remove. If you've got much of this, if you've got a dry acre that you're already starting to see some of this bud growth released, you're looking at 2 applications for sure to defoliate. The first application would target these large main stem and subtending leaves high on the canopy. And the best way to remove these smaller leaves is going to be increasing volume, increasing pressure, and running a fairly aggressive products. One of the PPOs is about going to be our only option. A product like Folex in that second shot would likely not do a very good job. We're going to be stuck with something like Display or Aim, Sharpen, something that would be very, very aggressive. And honestly, I'd love to be able to shed this, but desiccation might be the most reasonable goal for this material very, very close to the stem, low on the plant. Very difficult to cover. Again, you've got to increase volume, run pressure as high as you can. The idea is to fog it down in there. That's going to be the best way to get coverage and remove it from the plant. And we've had some experience with this in recent years. If you fail to address that, let's say you decide you want to just run a single application, we're definitely going to see an increase in color, an increase in leaf grade when we get the picker out there. We can really wreak havoc on some of our quality parameters if we don't make an attempt to address that regrowth low on the plant. I wanted to give a little update, some interesting things that we're seeing this year in the upper canopy from a disease standpoint. Started seeing reports really early last week and on into the weekend of some reddening occurring in the upper canopy, and it's generally associated with these leaf specks. And depending on the variety, the response can be a little bit differently. We have historically associated this exclusively with potassium, and we call it the leaf spot complex. It is generally considered to be Alternaria, Cercospora, and Stymphalium. We don't really worry too much about which one it actually is, but we do associate basically all 3 of those with deficiencies of potassium or the inability of the plant to take up potassium. And this is a really good example of what we would typically see. We'd start to see those edge of leaf chlorosis and beginning of necrosis of a traditional potassium deficiency. We'd start to see some of those speckling up top. Occasionally you'll just start seeing the speckling and you won't see much of the potassium deficiencies. But this has become very, very common in this season. I think a lot of it's associated with lack of rainfall. We've not taken up near the potassium we normally would. It's not because the potassium, as FIFA will talk about later today, it's not because the potassium's not there. It's because the potassium's just not been able to be taken up by the plant. We don't have the water that we need to get it into the plant. We do see quite a bit of a variety response. So some varieties generally are more determinate varieties, heavy fruiting varieties that are earlier. They're going to start to show some of these symptoms a little bit more severely, but we're seeing them even in some of our later maturing varieties. And I'm standing right now in a variety trial, in a fungicide trial with Delta Pine 1646. And even in this variety, we're not really seeing much of the potassium deficiencies, but we're seeing quite a bit of the speckling. So had Dr. Heather Kelly's student Ty Smith take a look at this, and he found both alternaria and stemphyllium present on these leaves. And this, again, this would be something that we would commonly see, but probably not at the levels that we're seeing it, at least in some areas. And varieties like this, a later maturing variety that generally has what we consider to be a stronger root system, you probably wouldn't associate this level of leaf spots with these varieties in a normal year. The reason I wanted to bring this up this year, when you're starting to see these deficiencies, a lot of times potassium is the first thing you think of. And for me, I've not considered this to be a yield drag at all, or any management strategies really to be appropriate to address it. But that management recommendation might change. And the reason I mention that, I'm standing right now in a Delta Pine 1646 trial where we've got 2 different fungicide timings, one at 3rd week of flower, one at 5th week of flower, and our goal here was to target spot, to see if we could see any management strategies that might reduce target spot incidence and severity and potentially protect yield. But what we've started to notice is a tremendous level of control of these leaf spots with only one application. And I'm very, very interested to see how this plays out from a yield standpoint. But I wanted to show the differences here. This would be a control plot, and you can see the leaf area is definitely spotted up pretty severely. We've got a lot of anthocyanin in production. We've got a lot of reddening of those leaves. And this would be a treated plot. And you can clearly see the differences in especially the upper canopy. Look, it's not 100% control in this trial. We've still got some spotting, but we can see a substantial decrease in the spotting associated with a fungicide application. Now again, we would typically not recommend a fungicide for this type of a leaf spot, and I'm not doing that right now. I think we need to wait and look at the yield results, but this is pretty exciting results in my opinion. These are important leaves to us. We talk about leaf age and how target spot typically starts on the bottom and impacts leaves that aren't important to us. If we're looking at the upper canopy and we start to protect subtending leaves for bolls that are just developing, that would logically, potentially result in an increase in photosynthate provided to the plant and would be much more likely to impact our yields. So stay tuned. We'll be talking more about this when we get into the winter meetings and we start to, after we get this data harvested, definitely put a blog out and most likely be talking a little bit about this at Cotton Focus, given how widespread these spotting issues were this year. Covered a lot of information fairly quickly. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out. And again, appreciate you tuning in to this year's Cotton Tour.